All right, it is lights out on this very special episode of the RLR podcast. I'm Nick, that's Matt, and today we are talking specifically about the F1 2020 season.
I'd say we're not just a season in review, but we're going to talk about some opinions we have on things that happened throughout the season, things we've been seeing over the past week, and also some stuff that, in the future, 2021, 22, and just anything that comes to mind and our general thoughts for the future of F1. So, want to head into the... It was a really weird season. You want to head into the season review?
Yeah, let's do season review. I should also make note, this is the first time that Matt and I are recording together in the same room for this podcast. COVID safe, of course. So let's take a look at the...
Well, one thing I want to say first off is, like you said, please excuse us mispronouncing any of these circuit names. We're trying our best, so please excuse us. In addition, this thing, I think, the start of the season in general review, it was weird. It stopped for a little, because of COVID, it just came to a stop. They had to figure out how to be safe, and to that credit, I think FIA and F1 did a great job at resuming safely and figuring out how to salvage as much of a 17 race season, which frankly, when they came back after the coronavirus stuff, myself included, I didn't think they were going to be able to get through 17 races in the season. So that's an easy overview there.
Yeah, not to mention the fun that we had with the virtual Grand Prix and the outfits and the costumes. Valtteri dressing as Geralt
Leclerc
from The Witcher. We had Leclerc as a banana.
And he's never looked better, right?
We had Gasly giving his win speech. He said it's never been quite the experience of being able to win and then get up and go make yourself mac and cheese.
I'd say something like usually when you win there's champagne, and he had mac and cheese waiting for him in the other room. So
yeah, or he had to go make mac and cheese. It was something along those lines.
That was cool to see. I think I tuned into that as well, and that's when we were we're trying to get into that stuff too with the esports or the sim racing and all that. And I think it was cool to see a different side of the drivers. Obviously, a little bit more fun side than their serious, media, image centric kind of pillars of the entertainment and sport world. So that was pretty cool to see. But do you want to hop into? We're gonna go over a couple things, a little bit, I think, from all the GPs this year.
Yeah, just a little bit on each race. Matt and I are gonna switch off here. So I'll start with the Austrian Grand Prix. The highlights of the race: Lewis and Albon had their crash. Max ended up retiring.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Valtteri won that one.
Yeah, and interesting enough, I mean, as we all know, Mercedes is a dominant team, but at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, it's expected that Red Bull shows up and outperforms Mercedes, and it looked like, I mean, frankly, I guess a little more specific here, yeah, Max retired, and which, shocker, right? I mean, arguably their number one, it's obviously the number one driver. And it looked like Alex was poised to win the race or do well. I mean, not win the race, but do well. And I think within like 10 laps to go, he crashed with Hamilton. Hamilton was quote unquote awarded or given, I think a penalty for that. I can't remember what it was.
That's an interesting, because they say he was awarded a penalty.
Yeah,
it's congratulations. Here's 5 seconds off your time.
Yeah, so he was given a penalty for causing that crash, but then Alex didn't win, and Red Bull didn't really quote unquote show up that day. Then it was cool though to see Bottas, a different Merc on top. So it was cool. Yeah. With that, and then we'll move next into the Steiermark Grand Prix. I hope I pronounced that
yeah,
right.
I believe so.
I would say I don't remember a whole lot except that the two Ferraris, who have obviously had issues here and there throughout the season, kind of just smacked into each other and then retired. So
it was a little more than a smack. I mean, I wrote the notes for this one, and I understand where Matt might be. Just kind of reading this. And
I don't remember this one that well, to be honest. It was the second race of the season.
Yeah, so basically what happened was the Ferraris smacked each other around, and I can't remember.
A little competitive?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Vettel or Leclerc who ended up with their wing completely off the car.
Oh, solid.
Their rear wing, I should say. And the front wing of the other car was damaged. I can't remember which one was which, but basically they both ended up retiring.
Great showing from the fancy horses.
The prancing horses?
Prancing horses, you're right.
Yeah.
Prancing horses.
So, not great. Other than that, pretty standard race. I believe the results were Hamilton, Bottas
So yeah,
for Hamilton.
Hambotver is the typical Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen in third. Two Mercs, and Verstappen. So.
Hambotver, the thing that if you're an F1 fan,
know Hambotver very well.
Yeah.
So with that,
the Hungarian Grand Prix, we had Magnussen defending very well from the prancing horses. And traffic cones.
Sorry, this is notes. I was having fun with the notes here, ladies and gentlemen. I put quote Magnussen defending well from the horses and traffic cones, i.e., he was Magnussen after pitting with Haas brought him in, was defending against Ferrari and McLaren after coming out of pit very well against cars that are obviously and clearly faster than his. So that's kind of cool to see one of the lower echelon F1 teams doing, one of their drivers doing really well against a middle echelon team. So,
yep. Then we had the Verstappen incident where he slipped off track, but he was able to repair it and then still finished on the podium. And then
and he broke a record. So
that's right.
The thing too is he finished third on the podium, I believe, behind. I think it was another. I think Hamilton was in first again and Bottas second. But fun thing is, those racing fans know Jim Clark, and maybe another episode of a podcast we go into racing legends. Jim Clark clearly being one of them. Verstappen actually passed Jim Clark's podium record that was his 33rd podium in at the Hungarian Grand Prix. So that was kind of cool. So moving on down, you have the British GP. So remember this season was also interesting because we revisited venues more than once, chief among which we had the British Grand Prix, and then the following weekend we had the 70th anniversary Grand Prix for F1, also at Silverstone. So at the British Grand Prix, the first one, we had a Magnussen crash and Kvyat crash, and Vettel took place over Gasly based off of an incident or a penalty.
Yeah. So what happened was Gasly overtook beyond the track limits and had to give Sebastian his place back, which ultimately led to Vettel getting a higher place over Gasly. Then both Hamilton and Carlos Sainz both had tire punctures.
Which we don't. I gotta be honest. For all the hard racing that we see in F1, I don't think we see a lot of tire punctures.
We don't really see a lot, but there were some. There was debris left over from I think it was Kvyat's crash.
Probably.
That caused the punctures.
Oh, we saw a similar thing. It was at Bahrain, where it wasn't Bahrain. It was it was Sakir, where we had from the Williams crash, and we had debris on the track and caused we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of covers that one. Then we had the
70th Grand Prix, which was the second race at Silverstone. Verstappen won, and it was
to see him winning.
Right, absolutely. It's always nice to see a kind of a mix-up, even though it might be the same three people majority of the time on the podium. It's nice to see a little change-up on the podium, at least. Yeah. And there was some good racing action from Albon and the Mercs.
Yeah, so I wrote the notes for this one. I was looking at the highlights, and we saw it seemed like the two Mercedes boys were trading places quite often. There was a lot of, arguably 1 and 2. The Mercedes are the best in the field, but at the same time, it's still nice to see those two compete, where it's not just Hamilton is always quote unquote better than Bottas. But we also saw a couple good midfield battles, generally good racing. Not anything that stands out, but Albon
this
had
year
some
was
good
a good
overtakes.
year for mid-year battles, though.
Well, clearly we had good mid-year battle all year for third in the Constructors' Championship with Racing Point, McLaren, and Renault. So, but yeah, we saw Albon had some good, shall we say, ballsy overtakes in there, which is nice to see because he's, for all the clout for or against Alex, he is a good overtaker, and that's one thing he does very well. So it was nice to see him exercise that ability.
He's good at defending in traffic too. We saw that a lot in this race as well.
Yep. With that, Spanish
Grand Prix, Leclerc retired after an engine failure, and other than that, it was a pretty quiet race.
Yeah, that wasn't a whole lot that I was seeing. Again, like Nick said, I think we saw some good midfield battle. We saw a lot of good, maybe besides Abu Dhabi, we saw a lot of good racing within the field, a lot of good position trading back and
Everything
forth.
Was kind of a interesting
Yeah.
Everything we can just set Abu Dhabi aside because that was.
We'll
get
cover
to
that last because A, it's the final race in the season, and B, because it's the most boring race in the season, so it goes last. And for those wondering, a little bit of a preview of our future, it looks like we're going to be, unfortunately, in my opinion, visiting Abu Dhabi as the last race of next season too. So clearly, the FIA isn't listening to the drivers and the fans and saying, "Hey, let's not finish the season here. It's boring." So we'll see what happens.
Anyway, going back
I have
to
a bone to
run
pick
back.
with Yas Marino.
Belgian Grand Prix, we saw. Oh gosh, I always butcher his last name. Giovinazzi.
Sure.
And Russell had their big crash that was very grand spectacle, and that was a rough crash. Both drivers obviously okay.
Yeah.
But and good thing, as we saw George Russell gaining some clout towards the end of the year.
If I seem to remember, we also saw this is one of the places that we did see, started to see Russell really coming into his own and really making strides and getting better throughout the season, because we have seen that. Otherwise, frankly, he wouldn't have been offered a seat in the Merc for the second to last race of the season. So. Besides that, though, I don't remember a whole lot. But besides those that happened,
that was pretty big. But other than that, it was a pretty standard podium. I believe it was Tambadver again.
Next was the Italian Grand Prix. So interesting enough, I didn't put this on here, but clearly the Ferraris didn't really come out to play in the Italian Grand Prix very very well.
The Ferraris didn't really come out to play much this year until we had some. Binotto.
Yeah,
stepping
interesting.
back. But...
We saw some improvement when Binotto wasn't there. Conspiracy? Coincidence? I think not.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, either way, so this was not one of the races where Binotto was gone.
He hadn't stepped away at this point, but we did actually see some good stuff going on. So this was a really cool race, because not only did Hamilton get a penalty, but so. To clarify, Hamilton got a penalty because there was a safety car out. And Hamilton, I believe, if I was reading and remembering correctly, he went into pit for fresh tires, but the pit lane was closed.
Yeah, and he was complaining that you couldn't see the pit lane closed sign early enough.
Which was ruled out because no other driver had even the was it McLaren was going to do a double stack, and they didn't have any problem, their drivers knowing. So he had a 10-second penalty where he had to come back around later in the race and just basically sit in the pits for 10 seconds and go back out. So that was interesting because drivers often complain about conditions far and wide, but you don't often see people go into a pit lane when it's closed. But besides that, we saw Leclerc had a horrible crash. We saw Seb have brake failure in the beginning of the race and crash through the polystyrene styrofoam barriers. We saw Leclerc have a terrible crash, and luckily he was okay, and of course he retired from the race. But maybe most notable of all, we saw this was the totally out of left field podium, which was awesome. We saw not only Stroll and Sainz in third and second, but Gasly won first. And maybe two of the most memorable images of the season are Gasly and Sergio Perez sitting on the podium to themselves, kind of face on the ground. Everyone's gone, just taking it in, kind of quietly crying or whatever themselves. Well, this is the first one of those two, so it was very cool to see.
Yeah. Then we had the Tuscan Grand Prix, which was very big for the double red flag.
And I will say that this race is one that I missed, but I frankly wish that I hadn't missed it from what Nick was telling me about.
Yeah, so we had the double red flag for incidences. I mean, there was just it. Otherwise, was a fairly quiet race. It was just
after the doubles. Right?
After the double red flag.
But you don't often see a red flag.
You don't often see a red flag.
Double red flag.
Exactly.
I mean,
and not to mention not only just a double red flag, but a double full standing start restart.
Yep.
Which the big thing out of this was everybody was concerned about transmissions and the longevity of transmissions throughout the rest of the season, just because a start is very hard on those transmissions.
Well, I mean, I think starting the engine and starting from stop are the two hardest. I mean, for those who might not know, I mean, to lend any perspective to why from a full stop start, from on one of those engines, you don't start these things with a turn of a key. They literally shove basically an impact wrench into the back of the car to turn these engines over to start them. So the tolerances are so tight inside that these engines can't stand. Like, there's a reason why they get 3 per year, right? They're not meant to last an entire year. They have a very short lifespan, let alone. And in that development, I think they're assuming, 23 race season, we're gonna have 23 starts, not 26, 27, and a 23 race season. So.
Right, and it just shows some of the engineering. I mean, we had you've got so many starts and so many practice starts during practice.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, it's just a lot of stress on the cars.
We could talk about too is AMG Project One. A little bit of side note, side quest here. I mean, they're trying to make a Formula One car into a road car. Well, there's a lot of stuff that goes into why that wouldn't work. Why you can't make a Formula One car into a road car.
What happens when you come to a stop sign? You're not going to launch it
can't exactly, like I said before, you can't exactly start your Formula One car by turning a key. So
exactly.
We can talk about that later, but it's interesting, I think.
That could be a later episode in and of itself, just with the engineering and things that are going into that. But Russian Grand Prix. On the first lap, Carlos Sainz misjudged the overflow barrier and caused I don't know if it was a red flag or no. That was a safety car.
It was a full safety car.
It was a full safety car because there was debris out on the track and his car couldn't get back in. Stroll had his crash out with Leclerc, and Hamilton had a double 5-second penalty for his practices.
Is this the one where he was complaining, even though like in the drivers' meetings things were clearly stated, and he still had a problem with that?
Yeah, technically it's the second time because the driver's notes also stated when the pit lane was closed.
Okay, so technically, yeah. But I seem to remember we did it like one of the podcasts before. You were telling me that he was. I didn't watch that. I didn't watch the practices that week, and he had got penalties for stuff that was clearly known by the other drivers and clearly articulated in the drivers' meetings.
Long story short, and I believe we either talked about this on the podcast or it might have been one of our first episodes.
I think so, probably. Given the where we are in the season, we're like halfway through the season at this point.
Right. So, long story short, Hamilton had his crybaby fest that I will say about not reading the notes carefully enough, where it said where you're allowed to practice start. He was practice starting at the end of the pit lane, which they considered dangerous, and he got a double 5-second penalty, so a total of 10-second penalty.
So not something you tend to see, from the world champ, not abiding by driver's notes and the rules and stuff like that. So I mean, obviously he wasn't happy, but I would also argue that you should have clearly known you weren't allowed to do that. So nonetheless,
Eiffel Grand Prix.
So this one, I was looking at this one at the Nürburgring, and I would say that it was interesting for the fact that we saw something really cool at the end, but all I really remember seeing is we saw a lot of drivers retire. I mean, the Nürburgring is a hard, regular everyday Joes and quote unquote go and can drive on the ring as it's coined, right?
It's technically a public road.
It is, and we can all you can see all year long both amateur and professional drivers and just your everyday mom and pop people crash. It's a hard circuit, right? It's not like it's not hard. So that said, we saw Ocon, Albon, Bottas of all people, and Albon, Norris, and Russell all retire from that race. Which, I mean, you might expect some of those lower tier teams guys to retire, but Bottas had to retire. I mean, I think it was he lost power, and it was an issue with the power unit or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Well, it was the same power unit issue that was coming up significantly in Secure and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Yeah, so clearly it's been a thread for Mercedes all year long, but maybe it started rearing its head back in the Eiffel Grand Prix. But a really cool thing, though, was we got to see Ricciardo back on podium, which we're kind of used to seeing him a little bit on podium back when he raced with Red Bull. Hasn't had the blast off season with Renault as obviously we might have expected clearly, but we did get to see him in third finish, which was cool again to see him back on podium. I think behind. I'm not sure if it was behind Hamilton Bottas or no. You're right. It would have been Hamilton Verstappen. That's right. My apology. Duh. Right. So again, very cool to see him back on podium.
Well, and he won the bet. He got to choose a tattoo. I still don't know which tattoo, if they even got it. But he got to choose back a tattoo on podium for his engineer. Yeah,
and I'll have to see if we can't see that come up in the news and see if we can't find whatever happened with that. So better keep his word.
Yeah. Moving on to the Portuguese Grand Prix, we had the Stroll crash, and then he crashed again with Lando. But then Hamilton had his world record set, 92 wins. So,
that's obviously an achievement in and of itself. Was that did Hamilton tie or win?
No, Hamilton tied in the Eiffel Grand Prix. The Portuguese Grand Prix was his 92nd win.
Yeah,
that was, he has more wins than any other driver on that day.
Gotcha. Well, if I remember correctly too, we saw an interesting thing with the track. This is where Bottas had broken that drainage grate, and they had to repair it like on the day of. It was a newly resurfaced track. So
newly resurfaced, but not as newly resurfaced.
Not as the Turkish Grand Prix, but it was newly resurfaced to the point where it had been resurfaced within the last couple of weeks, which is still never happens for Formula 1.
I think it was the beginning of the season.
Yeah,
but even so,
never happens.
But this is where we had the correct tires brought out.
Which one coming over? I wonder whoever got fired for that at Pirelli.
You never know.
Pirelli, let us know. We're curious. Moving past the Portuguese, we had the again. For some reason I'm getting all the hard to pronounce ones. So the Romagna Grand Prix, that was interesting. That in the fact that Gasly was Gasly one of the drivers who we saw make great strides in kind of proving Red Bull wrong throughout the season ish. That they took him off the seat too early kind of thing. He was out on lap 9 for a terminal issue, which you just hate to see that from a guy like him, right? Verstappen also took second, but as in the race, not at podium, near the mid or the end. But unfortunately, as he took second, his right rear tire punctured. He spun and had to retire because I think there was damage to the car, which Bottas had bad luck this season, and Verstappen had some bad luck this season too. I don't think we Bottas's horrible bad luck might overshadow Verstappen's a little bit, but Verstappen has had some bad luck this year.
2020 has just been a bad year for a lot of people.
It's been a weird year, and this is also when Albon, again, the last Red Bull out there, had his spin where he somehow totally went in between, I think, the two McLarens and didn't take anybody out, and it just almost like it was perfectly executed. Of course it wasn't, but he spun out, and then I'm not sure where he finished. It was almost a perfect Seb spin. Almost a perfect Seb spin, because more spins and more spins and more spins for him. But again, not something you want to see from second best team. I'm not sure where he finished, but he wasn't out. And then we also saw again four of the drivers out, which is just I find, I don't know who, but I find interesting in a bad way, because you never want to see more than one. But I mean, 3, 4, 5 drivers out is kind of a big deal because there's not that many on there to begin with. And Mercedes won their most notably they won their by points I believe this was the race where they won the Constructors' Championship for the 2020 season, to be followed on the next race by their driver, our now 7-time world champion
Lewis Hamilton, in the Turkish Grand Prix,
which was interesting.
Very, very interesting.
We did go over a lot of this in an earlier podcast. So, but quick cliff notes here.
But the cliff notes were: this is the race where we had the pink Mercedes on pole position,
Racing Point,
Racing Point on pole position. Well, first and second.
Yep.
It was also pouring rain right before the race.
Mm-hmm.
It was a brand new 1 week old
Something like
track.
that. Yeah.
Bad tires, very wet. Bottas had his 4-time spin cycle. Hamilton invented inner slicks.
I'm glad you put that on there. Yeah, he ran his wets down so far that he just made
his intermediates down.
Oh, you're right. Oh, I thought it was his
inner slicks.
I thought it was his wets though that he ran down.
No, it was the intermediates. So that's why the joke was inner slicks.
Okay. Should have got that. But the interesting enough, the one I think you forgot to put on here wasn't this not the race where they had either F1 personnel or they were using the rental cars to drive around the track, try to dry the track?
Yeah, I left that out because we had talked about that. we had F1 personnel driving little Renault Clios around just trying to get some kind of rubber on the track.
And dry it out and chalk that up again to stuff that you don't see in F1.
We also had the dog on the track.
We had a lot of dogs on track. What was it?
We had 2 races with dogs on track. That is
what did they
insane.
name one of them? It was.
I didn't hear anything about the naming.
It was one of them. I think one of the names of the drivers was Spaniel Ricardo.
Oh, that's good. Okay, I hadn't heard that.
They were trying to name the dogs after drivers, and that was my personal favorite. I can't remember what race. I think that was the Bahrain one. I think that was Bahrain.
It could have been
where Spaniel Ricardo made an appearance.
Yes.
And was Bahrain also not the?
Was it? Maybe I did hear. Was it Labdo Norris? Because it was a yellow lab running around.
Might have been.
Something along those lines. Anyway.
I think. Are we good on the Bahrain move to the Turkish? Sorry, move to the Bahrain.
Well, yeah. The big thing with the Turkish Grand Prix was that is when not only did Hamilton take his seventh world championship.
Well deserved.
It was where he invented the inner slicks.
I can't wait to see that in the 2022 season.
We'll have what would that color be? Purple?
I don't know. I should be tie-dye. I'm just making fun.
What's a mixture?
Bring back pink. Bring back the pink ones.
It would be like lime green, I guess, because it. What? No, white. It would. You'd have to mix the white.
You have to mix with the white and the red, so it would be orange.
No. Because
aren't the inners or the old
green?
No, white's the hards.
Yeah, so we'd be green and white. So you just get like a washed out green, like a seafoam green. I don't know. It would look weird, but
so aren't the intersects? Aren't the intermediate tires? But they're the soft compound.
Are they the soft?
I think they're the soft compound, but they're treaded, so they would be red for the softs, and green for the inners.
So we got Christmas trees.
So we got Christmas trees.
Okay.
So Pirelli, I want you next year because the driver's already not gonna like your tires next year. Clearly, add on there some inner slicks, and I want alternating red and green Christmas trees around the side.
There you go. That's the way to fix it. Of course.
Well, so moving on, now we've eclipsed all with the last 3 races of the season, and
we've covered these in the podcast in and of themselves.
I think starting sometime around the Portuguese Grand Prix was one of our first episodes. So
right.
Now we've gotten to Bahrain. This one was interesting. I think we saw Spaniel Ricardo run. I think this was a race where we saw Spaniel Ricardo run across the track, and also where a steward towards the end of the actual race ran across the track and almost caused a yellow or a virtual safety car. But that was
that was under virtual safety car. It almost caused an actual safety car, but then we actually had to.
Oh yes, right. But that was also we'll get obviously the most notable event of arguably of the calendar was where we saw Lance topsy-turvy.
I wrote the notes on this one.
I just read it. So Lance got turned upside. His world got turned upside down.
And by that we mean he ended up
upside down.
Upside down.
I think it was Leclerc who kind of turned him on, and basically I think Leclerc tried to cut the corner short, and then just got underneath his car and then flipped it.
Leclerc and bombing corners that don't have enough room go together like a fine pasta and a great red wine in Italian culture, because he bombs every single corner where there isn't space.
So that happened. It was Hamilton's. I didn't realize this. It was Hamilton's final win of the season. You're right.
Yeah.
Because he didn't race in Sakir because he came down with COVID.
And then
and
he didn't win
he
Abu Dhabi.
didn't. Interesting. But most notably, obviously, this was already past the news that both Haas drivers were not going to continue next year. So we knew this was their last season for both of them. And unfortunately, Romain Grosjean had that horrible crash where luckily, thank goodness that he came
escaped
out
with his life.
He escaped alive from the car. Thank you to all the safety devices and the halo and so on. He was recovering. And again, so he's okay. So that was obviously, I think, the most notable thing of even the entire calendar year, maybe even arguably over Hamilton being 7-time champion. And I hate that would overshadow even Hamilton's accomplishments. But again, all the memes that came out after of the hero, the fire, like the Game of Thrones memes were
saw a lot of those.
Walks out, or that character, I don't know her name, walks out of the building on fire. It was good to see that those came out after he was had left the hospital and was recovering. So hopefully we'll get to see him in some kind of debut, or some kind of in an F1 car, whether it be a Merc or a Ferrari. To hope because there is that outstanding plea that that's not his last memory in F1.
Well,
he can take a test.
Toto said if nobody else will give it to him, we will.
It looks like Haas isn't able to because they don't have cars from the test, and then maybe Ferrari could. I'm guessing Merc will. So hopefully we'll get to see him, drive another machine, quote unquote, to end his F1 career on a higher note. But that was Bahrain, a very interesting race to say the least. Which leads us to the second to last race of the year, which was the Sakir Grand Prix. Another time that we raced on the same track, but a different section. So Bahrain was the inner track. Correct. Essentially in Bahrain, and Sakir was the outer ring. And Max and a couple of I think Max most notably wasn't very happy because it was basically too. He was saying it was too oval. It wasn't a real track. So. Seems like they did okay though, but that was an interesting comment.
They did seem to go okay. This is the one where Hamilton had come down with COVID, which led us to see a very interesting grid.
Oh man!
In the sense that George Russell, the driver for Williams, ended up in his black Mercedes.
This was the roller coaster of emotions race.
Yes.
Oh man!
So we had George Russell in the black Mercedes taking pole position. So from one of the last place positions to one of the first place positions pretty much overnight. Leclerc bombed another corner, took out Max and Perez, but Perez was able to recover and fix his rear wing and actually make a great showing coming back.
Last to first.
Was it last to first?
It was last to first. After he pitted after the whole Leclerc thing, which Leclerc was penalized for taking out Max and breaking essentially Perez's car. Perez was last out of the pits. After lap one, he was last, and he came from last to first.
That's true.
He was also, I think, I can't remember how many years he won as a Mexican national driver. It was the first time that a Mexican national F1 driver had won a top podium spot since.
Okay, now it's
years.
Still starting to come back to me, even though this was only 2 weeks ago.
It seems like forever.
It just seems like, well, one, it seems like forever, but two, I'm just remembering, that's right, because we were excited for...
It was a roller coaster. It was amazing for Sergio.
We were excited for Perez. We were devastated for George. We didn't really know how to feel about Hamilton being gone. Mm-hmm. Nobody really knew what was going on with Mercedes, and their absolutely botched
double stack.
Terrible.
I mean, of course, that the next race in the snooze fest that is Yas Marina.
5 seconds and it was done.
Textbook double stack. I mean, we were ecstatic for Russell throughout the race because I found myself for the first time actively rooting for a Merc to win.
Yeah.
Because I wanted Mercedes. Wanted to because I wanted to see Russell and then Russell had a puncture which dropped him out of contention again, but he luckily fought back from what was, I think, second, effectively. After the puncture, he had to have his tire replaced.
Was he down to 14th?
And he was down to 14th, and he fought his way back up to, I think, Bottas 8th and him 9th. So he got 2 points, and I believe he had fastest lap, so he got a couple points.
He got a couple points.
His first points in F1, so again,
Absolutely.
Congratulations to him, and maybe most notably, it didn't go the way that we had predicted. Fantastic for Perez to see him on top. At the same time.
And on top of that, we had Carlos Sainz's first podium.
Yeah,
I mean, there was so much that happened in the Secure Grand Prix.
It was a great race. It was the best of races. It was the worst of races.
So.
And that leads us to
Abu Dhabi.
The last race. I mean, I know I'm hating on it. It's a gorgeous track. I will give you that. And I think it was something like 800 million euros to build or something like that. Of course, a man-made. It's a gorgeous track.
It's a man-made island. It's in the UAE, which is just oozing money.
I mean, oil money, right? Money from oil.
It's literally oozing oil, and that oil.
I think there, oil doesn't come out of the ground. They just pump the dollar bills out of the ground.
Yeah, pretty much at this point.
So, I mean, that said, it is, it's a good track, but not for racing action. I think the drivers would agree where, like we saw, how the race generally started with, Max, we saw Hamilton, arguably, I would say it was still not up to snuff, and we saw Bottas edge him out in qualifying, and then we saw Max edge both of them out to take pole position, which was amazing, right?
Right.
And then we saw pretty much that start, and it stayed that way for the whole race. We saw a little bit of midfield action.
Midfield action here and there. The Mercs were down on power.
Yep, which was a constant issue that they've had with their power units. But at the same time, there's only two heavy braking zones, two real opportunities to pass, and it's just not, it's just boring. It's just a boring race. Right. And I think even Hamilton had made a joke about that. So, I mean, but that said, the only downside, one of the real downsides, I think, to that race was the fact, congratulations, Daniel Ricciardo, but you stole Max's Grand Slam. Well, on the last podcast, we had talked about how I wasn't quite sure, and based on what I've been seeing online, it looks like Max had pole in qualifying. He won the race.
He led all the laps.
He led every lap. A Grand Slam would have been the addition of fastest lap, which I think Daniel Ricciardo just beat him out by, I think, as you had said, on one of the last laps, if not the last
I
lap.
Believe it was either the second to last lap or the last lap.
Yeah. And again, congratulations, Daniel, but come on, you had to steal. I mean, what a great way to send off the season for Daniel and Max, but that was still good to see. And so that's our season highlights here, season review.
That leads us into...
Interestingly enough, we have something I find kind of, ironic throughout the season. There's 4 main engine manufacturers, at least for this year and into next year, right? For F1. There's Ferrari, there is Mercedes, there's Honda, and there's Renault. I don't remember I had the article. I remember we actually looked at who's got whose engine. Obviously, Mercedes has a Mercedes engine. Yeah, Ferrari has Ferrari. We have Red Bull has Honda.
Well, because I remember it based on the meme. Okay. So there's, on the Ferrari side, there's the tractor, the red one. There's the better Ferrari, which is it was the slower Ferrari.
Which is the Alpha.
Which was the Alpha, and the slowest Ferrari, which was the Haas.
Yes, so and then Renault supplies for Renault and for McLaren, I believe.
Correct.
Right? Honda currently supplies.
So there was the Renault and the better Renault, which was the better Renault was the McLaren. Then there was the, there was the silver Mercedes or black Mercedes this season, black Mercedes, pink Mercedes, and bad Mercedes, which was the Williams. And then we had the fast Honda and the slow Honda, which were the Red Bull. And the slower one was the AlphaTauris.
Yep.
So
yeah, and that's about right. So yeah, so still through the 2021 season, Honda will still be, of course, a manufacturer for of power units as an engine supplier, but after 2021, they are no longer going to be in F1. So we'll have technically, at least for right now, remains to be seen, 3 engine suppliers. Interestingly enough, this brings in the fact that while Honda might be leaving, I hope I'm correct in saying this, that I think all the other engine manufacturers had penalties this season except for Honda, which I find very ironic.
Yeah, and Honda had their reasons for leaving. I believe they wanted to kind of follow the more green initiative.
That would make sense given they're a Japanese-owned company, and that's based on what they're investing in. I don't actually know why they're exiting. I never actually did the research to try and find out why.
I read up on it a little while ago, and we just didn't have the time to go back and research it before recording today.
Yeah.
But long story short, I believe they were pulling out for majority green reasons and things along those lines, but they are pulling out after the 2021 season, which will be interesting, and I hope that Christian Horner
needs an engine.
And I hope that Christian Horner has brushed up on his ask for help skills. So,
we'll divulge into that. I think a little bit later. I think we want to move into maybe some more. Now that we've got the season review over, we've got maybe current events, and one of those current events would be, I'm not sure if everybody's heard, there's a McLaren restructure, which has McLaren has not rather publicly had issues.
Yeah, they first announced it back in March.
I mean, they've been publicly having issues with the company, and in hard times. The pandemic obviously hasn't helped matters, and MSP was I think MSP Sports Capital is an American investment investment firm, and they now have a minority stake in
15%.
McLaren.
It's
Racing,
the McLaren Group,
which encompasses McLaren Racing, and so on. And interestingly enough, they over 2 years they're going to inject 185 million pounds of equity, and essentially bringing after that injection the value of McLaren Racing, which is not just F1, is also in the IndyCar what they race in the States here. I think it was 560 million pounds is the value of McLaren Racing.
When we say pounds, we're talking the British pound, the monetary.
I don't know the conversion rate, but it would be more than that in U.S. dollars. That's interesting. I hope it brings much needed, obviously, capital to McLaren Racing and restructure and stability, because no one wants to see McLaren go away as a manufacturer, as a racing team. I mean, they're always will be a storied name in any automotive anything. So
right.
I think this will bring much needed stability. I think it's obviously funding, and just overall continue the future for McLaren. And I'm sure we all want to see them continue to make their fantastic cars. And hey, they got third this year in the Constructors' Championship. That's frankly more where they usually have been in past years. So again, continued success in racing as well. So
yeah. Another piece of current events, just
something that I had noticed. Yeah, from them. We alluded to it on the podcast, I think, on Sunday, and safety in general this year, I think is we saw safety on display this year with F1.
We really did with the safety cell in Grosjean's car during that wreck that allowed him to leave that accident alive.
The halo doing its job. But you noticed, and you'll be able to dive into this a little bit better. There's the helmets, there's the suits, there's the car and all that. One thing that I find interesting that I hope the FIA would look at is the radios. And what I mean by that is we saw in the last race where we had Fireman Kimi, who was putting out the fire in his own car. He had to unplug, I believe, the radio from his car before getting out in order to maintain communication with his team. That doesn't seem like a very smart thing. Like, it seems like a cord like that, whatever. I think it was a radio. Whatever he had to unplug to get out, like when he got out of the car. Let's assume it's a radio. That doesn't seem very safe to me. Just like the fact that you had to that could catch you in the car, or if you for some reason still had to be obviously in communication with your team and the guys in the pit wall. Why should you have to remember?
Yeah, the Grosjean situation was different because he was surrounded by
everything
fire.
was. At that point you're just getting out of the car to save your life.
You're not trying to stay in communication.
Arguably, that's the worst case scenario. More incidents happen like this, I think, with Kimi, where the car lights on fire, or there's a bad crash like Leclerc from earlier in the season. At the same time,
or even like the Perez fire.
But how have they not moved? That is the radio, whatever that is. If it's a radio, how have they not moved that to like inside the helmet? I mean, they're using Bell helmets. They've got obviously the technology that goes into the helmets. How is there not a new system that isn't plug into the car? I don't get that. frankly.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them look at that, among other, I would hope that they look at more safety measures this year as well, like padding up, quote unquote, some of the barriers on straights where previously, like you had said, like where Grosjean crashed, you wouldn't expect people to crash because it's not a corner, but maybe we need to increase some of the guardrail safeties and some of the catch fences and tire walls on straights as well. Of course, that's a cost, but clearly there's a use for always increasing safety no matter what it is. And we also again saw all of the measures that we've seen so far with new suits and helmets and the safety cell and Halo show how useful they are too. So some good and bad.
Yeah.
Basically.
Continuing with current events.
Continuing with some good and bad
Yeah.
current events.
Well, what is being considered kind of like the angel and demon of the Haas team coming up this year.
Yeah, we've been, I think, silent on it until now. We were saving it until today to give our thoughts on Mr. Mazepin.
Yeah.
And you maybe want to hit maybe some other... I have opinions on Mazepin, but you were talking about just other F1 drivers, new drivers, and how they might not be living up to expectations. You want to go into that a little bit?
Well, it just seems like the incoming car... There have been a lot of people who have shown promise this year in F2 that are moving up to the F1. Uh-huh. Getting out of the junior leagues, finally. I don't necessarily think that some of them have the wherewithal to be in F1 at this moment. I feel like there are better drivers who don't have seats as of right now.
And when I'm talking about Mazepin specifically, just in general.
No, I'm talking in general. I think there are better drivers who are currently in F1 that do not have a seat. We've got Kvyat, we've got most notably Chaco.
Mm-hmm.
We've got
at least right now Perez, Hulkenberg.
Professional
Hulkenberg.
Villain. We've got...
I don't know the F2 drivers as well. That's one thing I want to get into next year is keep track of F2. Obviously, given the clout that's surrounded F2 and, problems it could cause as a potential feeder for F1. So there are a lot of F2 drivers that I've been seeing chats online with, specifically Mazepin, why him over these other drivers. And you were just telling me that... wasn't Williams that confirmed a F2 driver?
No. We have AlphaTauri.
That's one.
AlphaTauri has a new driver coming in.
It was blue. I was thinking it was light blue or white or dark blue or white. I had half of that right.
Dark blue and white.
I had the blue part right.
But yeah, so we have new drivers coming in. The real big one, and the reason this is in current events and not just talking about drivers in general, is the Mazepin situation.
So, yeah, it's So for those who might not know, I would assume people would know by now, but just in case, Cliff Notes, he was already given, still has, as far as we know, the seat for Haas next year, pinnacle of motorsports, right? And he was riding along, arguably enough, it was in a Porsche Taycan. So that's a fun fact for you. But
fun fact puts it in a bad light.
Yeah, but the car is still great nonetheless. But I think what happened is there was a woman who was in the backseat who was visibly intoxicated, and he had turned around and groped her. Correct?
I believe, yeah. So he reached back and essentially sexually assaulted this woman.
And it was posted to Snapchat and then very quickly taken down, I believe.
It was his Instagram story. So he was videotaping it, did the action.
Has since it's been taken down. Obviously, Haas has issued a while ago a statement saying that those actions are abhorrent and it will be dealt with internally and blah, blah, blah. Which, of course, people were applauding that statement because it is... Exactly. It is not...
They were applauding that they said it was abhorrent. They were upset when as of right now, he still has a seat.
Yeah, I think that's a separate argument. I for one, think that... I don't know what Haas is going to do, but I frankly don't think it's enough, especially in today's climate, obviously. Maybe we see these issues finally come to the forefront in the spotlight turned on thing, like these, frankly... It's not. It never was okay. But we're seeing instances of sexual assault and something like that become more mainstream, rightfully so, and actually being looked at. And I think that Haas needs to do more than just handle whatever they're going to do and handle whatever that is, handle internally. I would argue that given the aura that surrounds F1 drivers and the fact that they have to be, there's one side of me saying that don't hold drivers to this standard where they can't say bad things or be angry on a radio or whatever. That's just ridiculous. Let them race, and we all have frustrations and all that. But on the same frame, they have a presence like Hamilton, who has found his voice this season. These drivers are famous. They have a responsibility to act a certain way, whether they like it or not. That is the role they stepped into, and I'd say, I don't think he deserves his seat for this reason, for this instance, and actually his history.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know or don't follow F3, F2, and are maybe coming into this not really understanding F1 either, Mazepin is a hot-headed driver.
He's gotten in fights with drivers in paddocks. He is an aggressive driver and at times has tried to take people out. And there's an argument to be said that he wouldn't be where he was without his dad literally paying his way in.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, his father is a Russian
chemicals billionaire worth something like $7.2 billion. At one point, there was a bidding war for the former team Force India, now Racing Point, and between him and Lawrence Stroll. And we know how that worked out. So arguably, I would argue that if he had won the bidding war, we would have seen, not Lance Stroll, but it would have been Nikita Mazepin in that seat for the purple or pink Mercedes. Sorry, but that to be said, we were doing some analysis and watching some other takes on this, and while I think he deserves to lose his seat for the fact that there are better drivers than him, and this instance, he has shown prowess in his racing career at times, and he has driven F1 cars before and set very quick lap times, showing that as things get faster, he can rise to that challenge. So as a driver, without any other clout, any other blinders on, I'm thinking
I would say as a driver without any other drivers on the
skill
track
level, I think he deserves a shot.
Yes.
However,
when he's
I
challenged,
think he spoiled that.
Yeah, when he's challenged, he gets extremely hot-headed.
Yeah.
We saw him in Formula 3 actually beat another driver in the paddock, leaving him with a busted jaw and a black eye.
We also saw him, I don't know what race, but it was a F2 race, wasn't it, where he was, I don't know, we'll say angry about something, came smashing into, the quote-unquote winner's circle, smashed into the number 2 pylon, and sent it flying at the number 1 Red Bull driver, and almost hit him with it. I mean, yeah, of course, it's a piece of plastic, but it you know what it looks like, obviously. I mean, he's a hothead. I don't think on merit, I think he deserves a shot. Driver merit, talent, or in history.
I think he deserves a shot, but
I don't
personally think that he deserves a shot this year when we've got drivers who need seats.
I would agree to that. And who are frankly better, who aren't hotheads, who have shown that they might not be as quick in an F1 car, but neither are some of the F1 drivers now, and you get better over time, ideally, right? So I think there are much better choices. I think he's kind of, opened this door to be, shut out, for lack of a better expression. So I don't know. I think Haas needs to do more than just handle it internally. I don't know if we'll actually know what they end up doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's removed from the seat and someone else is brought in. I don't think he will be, frankly, because, Haas also needs an injection of capital from probably Mazepin's father, and we also want to see them continue in F1, no matter what. So, the argument could be made: are they choosing him and would stick with him for money reasons over better drivers? The argument, I think, an interesting analysis that we saw was, what if they sign Perez? And he has a lot of Mexican backers, which could probably bring as much capital as is Mazepin's father. So, and then you get a better driver out of it and all-around package. So, it's interesting. I'd like to see what happens, but frankly, there's still a lot of time to see. They have time to make choices.
Yeah.
The season just ended. The next season won't begin until March of next year, I believe, and like mid-March in Australia. So we got time, but we'll have to see how this I think this situation evolves rather.
Yeah, I definitely think we've got a long off season ahead of us to kind of go over some of these things. Finally, the last thing I just kind of wanted to bring up was the whole Instagram bio situation.
Say, from drivers though, we've also heard a lot, a little bit, a little bit more positive note. We've seen some argument and some speculation going on about a Verstappen Bottas, talking about upcoming drivers and so on. By the way, Mick Schumacher, the Schumacher name returns to F1 for Haas next year. Great to see that. A lot's resting on that man's shoulders, and I think he'll deliver, personally. But that said, we also saw interesting with articles going back and forth talking about, is Russell going to replace Bottas? Russell has said that he will drive for Williams, but Toto has come in and seems like that is, he's kind of squalled, though, brought rumors back up, quote unquote, and made it possible that despite contracts that Bottas has, Russell could replace him, quote unquote. But then we also saw Valtteri Bottas for a brief moment, I'm not sure if it's back right now, but for a brief moment, take the Mercedes AMG Petronas stuff off of his Instagram bio. Because Instagram bios, see, I had to get that transition in there, guys. I didn't want to just jump straight in. I had it all planned out, so I hope you bear with me there, but because of Instagram bios.
And because we're not a video podcast, you can't see me shaking my head and covering my face right now. Speaking of Instagram bios, thank you for that transition after the fact. Apparently an Instagram bio is the all-knowing word in F1 as of right now.
And it can't be the better you are, the more simple your bio is. I don't know how this started, but I saw Red Bull get in on. I saw Max and Alex get in. Mercedes, of course, with their on-fire social media presence.
Their social media, whoever is the social media
Red Bull
person,
getting jabs at. We can talk about that too. Red Bull was jabbing at Racing Point because Mercedes had posted their Instagram or Twitter had posted that the W11, it's arguably one of the best, if not the best, race cars ever made, retired, and then Red Bull comes in and jabs, hey, Racing Point, it's not what you mean, it's not retired, here's your car for next year.
Being that, for those of you who don't know or might be listening to this as a kind of a first-time thing, Racing Point legitimately took
They say they didn't.
They didn't, but it's pretty clear that they did take the Mercedes 2019 car and make it their own.
And it clearly performs very well.
Yeah, it clearly performed significantly better than when they designed their own car. Yeah. Allegedly.
Allegedly. But apparently, I found this... I like seeing that human side of the argument over Instagram bios and the jabbing of social media, because, I mean, not just F1, but you see companies all the world over. It's no longer like it to be all the, nice and put together and proper and respectful. You literally see companies cursing out their customers on social media. I find it hilarious.
Wendy's is on top of it.
I mean, so it's cool to see that the shade that can be thrown by these companies and it's interesting. And apparently, I thought it kind of cool. A little bit more human side that, again, these drivers, they like to have some fun,
Yeah.
Like Lando and maybe not quite Lando, or not Lando.
Did you see what the
banana suit?
What the AMG? Yeah. Did you see what the AMG Twitter admin said in a comment today? Someone said, "Oh, are you getting ready for Racing Point to take the W11?" And they responded with, "It's gone so far that I'm going to be Racing Point's admin next year." Which they're messing around with it. They're having fun. They're playing. It's good for the sport. Yeah. It's good to show
it's good to show F1 because it is the pinnacle. I argue as well, pinnacle of racing, but it's always been huge, and it probably always will be in some form, but hugely expensive, prohibitive to enter, very snobby and cliquey and political, and obviously I think it's still political and there's things that have to change, but it's nice to see it being brought down a couple levels for for your average Joe kind of thing, and they're having fun with it. So that's cool to see. But I think that's what else we got. I think that's pretty much in terms of current events. But everything else is kind of maybe somewhat current, but more so like thoughts on the future. And you want to talk about thoughts on, well, possibly the most hotly debated or speculated thing right now is Red Bull's extra seat. Red Bull's second seat. What about Alex?
Obviously, Max is retaining his spot based...
As if there was any question.
Right.
He's a fantastic driver. He's an excellent driver.
And I think that the second seat is very hotly contested right now.
Because we don't usually see it waiting this long for confirmations.
Yeah, and we mentioned in the podcast on Sunday, but more specifically, the interview after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix with Christian Horner, who is the team principal for Red Bull, basically saying he still wasn't sure if Alex had his seat next year.
Yeah, they had to sift through the data and to let us know. And even Alex, they had an interview with him, asked him the question, and he didn't make any comment for or against. He just said, we'll see what happens.
He's got to be sweating bullets at this. If he doesn't know already by now and they just haven't released the information, he's got to be sweating bullets.
I don't think he knows it, because even if they hadn't released the information, F1 news sources, Sky Sports, they'd all know already. They'd find a way to find out.
Yeah, that's true.
And we haven't heard about that either. So I don't think they know yet. But we're constantly seeing, are we arguably is Albon gonna have a seat next year in F1? Perez arguably deserves one as well. And are we just waiting for Red Bull to confirm Perez to their second seat? I mean, I think I've said it before. I get it with Red Bull. I think Alex has been such a roller coaster throughout the year that I get why they're taking so long to figure it out. And he had a good showing at Abu Dhabi, at Yas Marina, GP, circuit, sorry. And I think it'll be a hard decision for them regardless. But if you're asking me for my thoughts on the future of Alex and Perez specifically, or the Red Bull second seat, I think it goes to Perez. I think Perez... Well, they both showed prowess in the season. Perez showed even more. He's got backing behind him. He's got following. He's a great driver. Not that Alex isn't, but I think he's just better. And I think the article I just read the other day is, quote unquote, I think we're just waiting for Red Bull to confirm Perez.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's my opinion, at least.
Yeah.
I hate to see
I really would hate to see Alex go. He did put up he did his best. He absolutely did his best. I just don't know, and I hate to say this, but I don't know if his best is up to Christian Horner's standards.
And Red Bull being, having won multiple Constructors' Championships back to back, just like Mercedes before,
being the second in the Constructors' Championships
behind
this
Mercedes,
year.
Like right now they are one of their top tier team, and they churn through their second seat. Max has for a while had the first because he deserves it, right? And it's not clarify. It's not supposed to be a first and second seat, but let's be honest, it's a first and second seat for every team, frankly.
Yeah.
I would challenge someone to argue that Mercedes doesn't have a first and second seat. Yeah, okay, it's Hamilton. Sorry, he's first. Bottas is second. Even when their strategy is whoever's in the league gets to call the shots, I get that. But there's still a first and second seat. I mean, okay. Anyway, that's get that out of the way, right? I think I've said it before in a previous episode. I'd hate to see Albon leave, Alex leave, but if he does, I get it. He is a good. I'm not gonna say he's an excellent driver. I think he's a good to great driver given the circumstances. I think he's a good driver overall. I just don't think, like you said, he's good enough for the second seat because Red Bull needs to find someone who can challenge Max. Kind of like the Mercedes. Bottas might not be as good as Hamilton, but he's still a great driver, and he still challenges Hamilton from time to time. Red Bull needs the same thing. Red Bull has a Hamilton. They need a Bottas now. Right. They have always needed a Bottas, and that's why they keep churning through that second seat. Right. Someone has to be good enough, and I think Perez would be at least worth a shot.
I think Perez in the seat of a Red Bull would be that would be a very, very good combo. I wouldn't say that it would be on par with Hamilton boat
Oh,
times.
no, yeah.
But it would definitely give Max another challenge, provided that the cars were...
Well, see, because here's the thing. It's not
equal.
just about winning races. It's not just about number one driver. It's not just about Hamilton. As you talked about, I think, last week, it's a two-driver strategy. I mean, you need to qualify on a certain kind of tires to get a certain kind of start. Yeah, you might put most of your eggs in the Hamilton or Verstappen basket, but you need your second driver to be competitive with your first, and therefore the other best drivers on the field to provide defense. If you're pitting that second driver to allow a window to get the number one driver back up, so you get a 1 and 2 or a 2 and 3. I mean, there is a place and importance for both drivers.
It's 100% a team sport. This isn't a single driver sport. So,
and the thing too is we don't talk about often enough. It's not just the drivers. I think a lot of the drivers make this known as well. It's everyone. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are in the factories who build these parts, who test, thousands who are F1 personnel who travel track to track. The drivers, the garage. I mean, the engineers. This is a, I've read an article. Real F1 fans. I'm not saying that that we are or aren't. I would never call myself a real fan because I'm just a fan of F1, right? But quote unquote real F1 fans know, like you said, that this is a team sport. Where it's not just the driver. As much as it looks like it is a team sport through and through.
Absolutely.
So
that being said, and since we've been talking about Red Bull, we should probably bring up the engine freeze.
Yeah, so thoughts on Alex, the future, another future thing. So obviously, again, we alluded to it before. I think we've actually referenced it in the previous episode too. But this engine freeze thing's interesting because, maybe a quick hit. Honda's leaving after 2021. Red Bull, I think, wants to continue developing the IP with that Honda because it's a good power unit, obviously. But given the pandemic and given them trying to, F1 FIA trying to cut costs of entry to F1 and development costs and manufacturer costs and so on, you see that Red Bull obviously doesn't want to. They want to continue racing with that unit through 2022 to give them time to start developing their own power unit, quote unquote. And that's a lot of money and a lot of time that they can't just start doing, after next year. That takes, Mercedes and Renault and Ferrari have been doing it for a long time. It's not something you just start. So I think a lot of the Ferrari and Renault are now on board with an engine freeze through like 2022 or 2023, something like that. And I think it would allow Red Bull time to develop a program, to develop an engine, and that way it also maybe will level the playing field a little bit. There's something to be said that if you freeze engine development, one manufacturer might get really far behind another one in terms of when you're like allow incremental development. So they're talking, I think the last thing they have to figure out right now is between Red Bull and Honda, there's two different places where their engines are made. Like the internal combustion engine is made in Japan and the rest of it's pretty much made, the electrical stuff's made in, I don't remember the name, but somewhere else. So that's not an easy just Honda giving it all to them. That's one thing. Another thing is construct, again, what you need some kind of like a help or a crutch that if one manufacturer gets so far stuck behind another one, obviously it won't be competitive and that's not good for the sport. So you need something kind of built in the rules from the FIA because only they can deliver an engine freeze, bring down an engine freeze and so on like that. What I'm getting at, there's a lot of stuff that still has to be worked out, I think. It seems like we're close. I think we're going to get an engine freeze to benefit Red Bull. Toto Wolff seems on board. Mercedes and Ferrari is now on board. Renault seems now on board. McLaren's on board. The big manufacturers, all the ones who frankly manufacture power units. So seems like we're going to see it. I think it's warranted. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, we're going to have, maybe...
Well, and this isn't the first power unit freeze we've ever seen.
No, I think there was one around like 2005 too. And it's all around like, for emission stuff and costs and so on. But there, even with the engine freeze, in terms of, like general thoughts and whatnot, we're going to see a brand new car in 2022. And throughout, 2022, and I think in 2025, there's a new engine coming from the FIA, a new, we're currently running a V6 hybrid turbo. They're going to be running a new engine, which, there's always increasing emission standards. And there's so much I think it's going to be changing in the next 10 years here with F1 that there's just too much to keep track of. So we're going to try, I guess.
Yeah. We'll do our best to keep you informed.
We're probably much like you guys where we might sound smart, but we're we're just fans of F1. We're trying to follow as much as we can. We're fans about with racing, anything, an engine in general. And, we're not experts. We're just trying to follow what we can, whether it be a starship or a spacecraft or F1 or a plane. It's just stuff we like that we enjoy talking about.
So I think we're going to blast through these last couple updates with the
couple
F1.
New tracks next year, at least that we know of.
New tracks, team changes.
Yep.
We're going to give you our general thoughts, and then we're going to sign off on this one. But
tracks for next year, we got 23 race season.
23 race season as it sits right now.
Again, we'll see with COVID and all that, but
yep. So
some new tracks.
We've got we're bringing back the Dutch baby.
Nick put that one in there.
For those of you who listen to the podcast, know that I go over to my grandparents' house.
And she makes a killer Dutch baby from what
yes,
I've heard.
Dutch baby breakfast has been the breakfast of choice a couple of times, and
we're gonna
delicious.
see a Dutch track in another. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but
it's Zandervoort.
Yeah, that's it. It was a weird name, but that's in the Netherlands, and F1 has raced there before, but not, I believe, since 1985.
Correct.
So that it's going to be on the calendar from 2021 forward, I believe. So it's cool to see that come back, essentially a new track. We also have a new track announcement that we know I think is brand new. Is Saudi Arabia, which is interesting.
Which has been extremely controversial. Not as controversial as Mazepin, but it's very controversial in the sense that the Saudi Arabia has been fairly known to be
for rights violations of numbers, different kinds. And I think the question is F1 following, the right things, or are they following the money? I mean, and there is something to be said about that. But
especially since they're going to be partnering up with the women's racing series, Formula W. Is it Formula W? I think it's Formula W.
I don't know. I'll have to do a little
Either
research
way,
on that.
they're partnering up with the women's series, yet they are taking a race in a country where women still aren't allowed to drive.
Yeah, I thought that maybe they're allowed now. I could be wrong, but arguably women don't enjoy, I would say, full freedom, quote unquote. And I'm not arguing if that's right or wrong. It's not me to say it's not my culture. I don't live there. I have my opinions, which we don't talk about now, but it's controversial for a reason. So we'll see how that shapes out. Like Nick said, it's set right now, quote unquote. I'd say wet concrete.
Yeah.
But frankly, with how COVID ruined the year this year, we don't know what'll happen next year. Frankly, hopefully there's some more stability in the calendar, but you never know. So with that, I think the last thing would be there's going to be some team changes for the 2021 season, literally next year, not 22 or beyond.
Renault is becoming Alpine.
Yeah, which is interesting because Renault, a history name in, automotive, any racing, technically Renault's last race, I believe, was this year in Abu Dhabi, 2020. They will be Alpine next year, so they'll be starting from the ground up as a new constructor, as a new team, essentially.
It'll be pretty much, they're going to be using the Renault development. But Alpine,
stuff.
For those who don't know or who aren't up on the car community, Alpine is like a specialty brand that Renault has bought. Mm-hmm. It's essentially like how Nissan has their Infiniti line. Mm-hmm. Alpine is a very...
Would it be like BMW's relationship with Alpina?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Or Mercedes with Brabus?
Because no, they're not an additional. They're their own vehicles, but they're highly specific. So those who know the Alpine name, it is a very, very popular name when you go back to the old days of rally, rally and rallycross. You're talking some serious heavy firepower when it comes to especially the short-lived but very popular Group B rally.
Yep.
So Alpine, it's kind of following that name. It is a racing name. It's just not the kind of racing that we've, at least from my experience with the brand, it's not something that we've seen up until recently being something a track car.
And I guess I don't know why. And I think I don't even the other ones. I don't know why they're changing their name, but I think it's for those who might not know F1. And moral of the story is they will be Renault no longer. Renault will not be a constructor next year. They will be. Renault has ended its F1. It could come back in the future, but Renault, as we see it, has ended its F1 career. Despite everything being the same, it's not Renault next year. It's Alpine.
Right.
In the same way that Toro Rosso this last year
became
AlphaTauri, a brand new constructor. Constructor being the teams in there. Same thing for Racing Point. This was Racing Point's last season. Very short-lived team from Force India to Racing Point to the new one, but they're going to be called, or they're going to be Aston Martin Racing. The good thing is we're going to see Aston Martin take a much larger role in F1 and racing again because they've been, part of.
They've been part of the Red Bull team for a very long time, so they are actually separating from Red Bull, which will now instead of being Red Bull Aston Martin, they're going to be Red Bull Honda / Red Bull Tag Heuer.
Yeah, something like that.
But now we've got Racing Point no longer being Racing Point. But this is an even bigger change because I believe it has been confirmed that they are going British Racing Green.
They are. Yeah, so it'd be nice to see it. We talked about racing colors.
No more pink Mercedes. We now have green Aston Martin.
We now have British Mercedes.
Well, it might be green Mercedes. But, yeah.
It's good to see, for those who listened before, I love I love British Racing Green as my tied for frankly first top racing color, if not close second. Good to see the racing, British Racing Green back into racing, frankly.
Yeah.
But again, they're going to be Aston Martin Racing or Aston Martin, something along those lines. And yeah, we'll be Red Bull.
It'll be Red Bull Honda for at least a year.
Red Bull Honda for at least one more year. I think even past the Honda days, Tag Heuer will still be involved. As I said here, I think we're both wearing our Tag Heuers. Nick's got the new Tag Heuer smartwatch on. I've got the Carrera, the Heuer 01. We love our Tag Heuer, but that said, it's interesting. So I think general thoughts to close out here, is what we're going to see next year. I think we're going to see a lot of change in 22 with the new car and whatever these engine freeze shapes out to be, and even beyond F1, with new engines coming from the FIA and regulations. And I think we're going to see, past 21, the sport hopefully become more new entrant friendly, a little bit cheaper, less cost prohibitive for manufacturers and so on. I hope that we, past this year, see drivers really take a step into, their role as public figures even more so than they already have, and to realize that responsibility that's on them. Frankly, I think we will still, for next year, see Mazepin in the seat, and we'll feel about that how we do, and we'll see how that shapes up. Good to see Schumacher back in there. I would hope to see Perez. We'll see how Red Bull shapes up, and Mercedes with Hamilton. But frankly, no matter the drivers next year, I think we're going to see a repeat of next year with some worse tires. I know the drivers aren't happy about the tires that are coming down next year because they're more durable and they're harder. They like softer tires. I frankly think we're going to see a repeat of this year. Mercedes is the favorite to win. Red Bull next. Hopefully a close fight for the third place in the Constructors' Championship. Hamilton with the 8-time world champion. That's what I think we're going to see, frankly. And I wouldn't be angry at it or upset. Just maybe I'm looking more forward to 2022 with the new car and the further changes with F1. And this next 2021 might be a placeholder for me.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what happens. My general thoughts are I'm excited to see what happens in 21. What kind of developments there are. I'm interested to see what Mercedes comes up with the now disallowing of DAS.
Which we haven't even talked about that, but I think I don't agree with that decision, but not for today.
Yeah, so I think between.
Well, maybe it is for today. I mean, because
it's
F1. I mean, the DAS system is where the Mercedes drivers can basically.
It's a dual-axis steering system, or DAS.
And it helps them warm their front tires because they can change the steering angle of their front tires from the what's the actual term when it's slanted?
It's the camber.
Camber.
They can adjust the camber.
They can adjust the camber and helps manage tire wear in their front tires and warm them up, and they are allowed to use it this year, but the FIA has said no to next year, which I don't agree with because you're stifling further improvement, further technological advance with F1, and I want to keep seeing F1 continually push the boundaries and be the pinnacle of racing technology. So I don't agree with the decision. So that's my take on it.
Well, I'm interested to see what they come up with. I'm interested to see if Ferrari can make any kind of bounce back.
Let's see if they can turn their tractor into a race car again.
Yeah, exactly. I am interested to obviously see the final driver lineup, and I am extremely interested to see what Mercedes does with their livery this year, because there's also
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
There's also some rumors going around about the because the name livery, and was confirmed in my thoughts, was the names were specifically done in silver to show the black peeling away from the car and the silver coming out underneath. And for those who don't know, Mercedes cars have been typically considered the silver arrows.
Because,
they were silver, and, arrows are slick through the air, as they're designed to be, these being no different.
They changed the livery for support of Black Lives Matter, and I think halfway through the season. Right? They changed it black.
Well, the black was just an anniversary.
I thought that they changed, or was it the suits that they changed from white to black?
Well, everything changed. Everything went black this year with the AMG team, the Mercedes team. So it was I don't know the official reason why they decided to go black. I do know that it was
support.
I think
I could be wrong.
I thought it was a specialty skin, just like Ferrari going back to the special Italian Grand Prix.
Gotcha.
Skin for their was it the 1000th race?
I don't know enough to say yes or no.
Either way, I think I'm interested to see how Ferrari does. I'm interested to see, obviously, the final driver lineup. See how things go.
What do you think the season will be, though? Do you agree with my thoughts? It'll be a typical what we come to expect at least for one more year, or do you think it'll be something different?
At least right now, from what we've seen, and obviously we just had the 2020 season end, I could see it being the same kind of setup. Now, if someone comes out with something crazy, and they pull the sheet back on the car, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I can see why that would be faster than a Merc.
Frankly, I would love to be proven wrong.
Exactly. That is the best way to possibly put it. I would love to be proven wrong, and thinking that next year is going to be a business as usual season. So
that said, even if I was proven right, I still will gladly watch. If I don't watch them live, before every race, my love for F1 will not be stifled or decrease in any way.
I'm just happy it's getting back around the world now that we've got. At least in the United States, we have a COVID vaccine that has been administered. We'll see
in
how
Europe,
that ends
I believe in England.
Yep. So we'll. I'm hopeful that we start seeing these back again.
Yep.
So.
And you say we the U.S. has always made fun of for like our World Series, and we call our American football winners of the Super Bowl as world champs, and it's only in America. Well, F1 is truly a world sport. There's drivers from all other countries, teams from all other countries. They go over the world. It is a world sport, and like you said, I didn't think about that, but it'd be cool to see it back around the world. More so on a more stable around the world trip than we have seen this year.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
I think that's pretty much got me covered.
All right. Well, with that, everybody, that's the checkered flag on this not week, but this special edition, Formula One edition of the podcast. A little a precursor next, or maybe for Sunday. We could be in the works for a special guest to visit us come Sunday. We're still working out the details, so hopefully we can bring that to you guys this Sunday, if not very soon. But with that, make sure to check out all of our social medias at Redline Resorts on all platforms. And if you guys want to interact with us or have questions or want to send us something, reach out to us at podcast@redlineresorts.com. With that, I'm Matt, and that's Nick, and we'll see you guys next time on Sunday.
See you guys soon.